It started with a moment so unexpected, so strangely ordinary, that no one in the room realized how important it would become. It was late afternoon inside Trump's private office, one of those calm, golden hours when the sun falls perfectly across the room, turning everything warm and quiet. The day had been filled with routine meetings, reports, and the usual stream of decisions that moved nations but rarely moved emotions. Trump had just settled back into his chair, glancing through a folder of documents, when the silence broke. The door burst open. His assistant, Mark, stepped in with a tightness in his expression that instantly grabbed Trump's attention. Mark was not the kind of man who panicked. He was calm, organized, almost robotic in how he handled things. So when he walked in looking unsettled, Trump knew something unusual was happening. "Sir," Mark said, catching his breath, "you just got a call, and I think you should take it." Trump frowned slightly. "A call? From who?" Mark hesitated. "A farmer, sir, from Iowa." A farmer? That alone made Trump raise an eyebrow. He had spoken to thousands of people during campaigns and rallies, business leaders, world leaders, celebrities, critics, supporters, but rarely did a simple, everyday farmer reach him directly. Calls like these were typically filtered through multiple layers, sorted, reviewed, categorized, and often never reached his desk. But the way Mark delivered the message, the tightness in his voice, the seriousness in his eyes, it all suggested this was not just a random man calling out of curiosity or frustration. This was different. "What did he say?" Trump asked. He said you need to hear him, that it's urgent, and he said it's the truth. The truth. Something about that phrase shifted the atmosphere in the room. Trump slowly closed the folder in front of him, curiosity rising. Every day, people claimed they had the truth. Politicians, reporters, advisors, online activists. Truth came in many shapes, from many mouths. But rarely did it come from someone who actually lived in the dirt, woke up before dawn, and fought every day just to keep their world alive. Trump nodded. "Put him on." A few seconds later, the speakerphone lit up, a quiet crackle, then a steady voice. "Mr. Trump, this is Jacob Miller. I appreciate you taking my call." The voice was older, maybe mid-50s, the kind of tone shaped by long days, cold mornings, and more responsibilities than anyone could count. There was no fear in his voice, no hesitation, just a weight, a heaviness that spoke louder than any introduction. Trump cleared his throat. "Yes, Jacob, I'm listening." And what came next was not political, not dramatic, not rehearsed. It was painfully real. "Sir, I'm calling because I believe you should hear the truth from someone who stands in the soil every day, not from a report, not from an advisor, and not from a television screen." Trump leaned forward slowly, elbows resting on his desk. The first sentence alone carried more honesty than most speeches he heard in a month. Jacob continued, "I'm not calling to argue or blame you or demand anything. I'm calling because things out here are not how they look from up there." There was something raw in his voice, something that came from a place of deep struggle, not anger, a quiet fight inside a man who had been pushed too close to the edge. "I've been farming my family's land for 32 years, Jacob said. "My father farmed it before me. His father farmed it before him. 3 generations. And now I'm the one who might lose it." Trump felt a shift inside him, small but noticeable. Jacob wasn't rushing. He wasn't emotional in a chaotic way. He was steady, like a man who had said these words to himself 1,000 times before finally speaking them out loud. "I know you're a busy man," Jacob continued softly. "But this is all I have left. Someone has to understand what's happening to us. Someone has to hear it." Trump glanced at his assistant, who stood quietly near the door, unsure whether to stay or leave. Trump motioned for him to stay. "Go on," Trump said calmly. "I'm here." There was a small pause, one that carried the weight of unspoken pain. "Mr. Trump," Jacob said, "the people feeding this country are breaking, and most of us feel like no one sees it, no one hears us, and no one cares." Those words didn't just enter Trump's ear. They sunk into him. This wasn't a political complaint. This wasn't a speech. This was a cry for help from a man who represented thousands like him. And for the first time in a long time, Trump felt something unusual during a phone call. He felt the truth pulling him in. The kind of truth that doesn't come from charts or advisors, but from the heart of a man standing in a field, watching everything he loves fall apart. And that was the very moment, when Trump realized this call was going to change something. Jacob took a slow breath before continuing, as if preparing to open a door he had kept shut for years. "Sir," he began, "people see fields and tractors and think farming is simple. But farming is life itself. It's a world with its own heartbeat." He spoke about his mornings, how he woke up before the sky even thought about turning blue, how the first sound he heard wasn't an alarm clock, but the soft rustle of wind passing through corn stalks and the distant moves of cattle waiting to be fed. It was a life built not on convenience, but on discipline. "I start my day before the sun, and I end it long after it goes down," Jacob said. "We don't get weekends. We don't get breaks. The land doesn't stop, so we don't either." His voice carried pride, but also exhaustion, the kind that sits deep in the bones. He described the fields not as property, but as memories. Every acre told a story. Every fence post held years of sweat and sacrifice. Every barn beam carried the laughter of his father and the advice of his grandfather. "This land isn't just dirt," Jacob said. "It's family. It's the only inheritance we know." But then the tone shifted. Jacob talked about the slow, creeping changes, how farming costs had risen faster than any harvest could keep up with, how the price of seed doubled, how the price of fertilizer tripled, how equipment repairs cost more than some people's cars. "You buy a tractor part today," he said with a dry laugh, "and you feel like you bought a small house." Trump had heard economic reports before, but hearing it described like this, from someone living inside the storm, made the numbers painfully real. Then came the hardest part. "Mr. Trump, the worst thing isn't the cost. It's the fear." Jacob described neighbors, strong people, hard-working people, who used to be unbreakable. Farmers who once stood proud and firm now sat at their kitchen tables with their heads in their hands, staring at bills they couldn't pay. "I've seen grown men cry in their barns," Jacob said quietly. "Men who survived droughts, floods, sickness, everything, now breaking because they can't keep up." He talked about a young couple down the road who had taken over their parents' farm, only to sell half their land a year later. He talked about an older farmer who worked his entire life, only to lose everything 2 months before retirement. And he talked about kids who used to dream of taking over family farms, now leaving the land behind because there was no future in it anymore. "But the saddest part," Jacob continued, "is that most people don't understand. They see food in stores and think everything's fine. They don't see the people behind it." For a moment, silence filled the room on Trump's end. Jacob broke it with a sentence that hit like a punch. "Sir, it feels like the country we feed has forgotten we exist." Trump felt something shift in him again, a mix of empathy, responsibility, and a growing sense of urgency. Jacob wasn't asking for attention. He wasn't asking for sympathy. He was simply explaining a world hidden behind supermarket shelves and dinner tables. A world where every meal starts with someone like him, someone fighting battles no one else even sees. And as Trump listened, truly listened, he realized Jacob wasn't just describing farming. He was describing survival. Trump had been listening quietly, absorbing every word Jacob spoke. But then Jacob said something that made him sit up straighter, something that felt like a sharp edge of truth cutting through the room. "Sir," Jacob said softly, "a lot of farmers, they don't think you understand them anymore." Those words didn't sound like an accusation. They sounded like disappointment, deep, honest, and heavy. And for Trump, who prided himself on connecting with everyday Americans, the sentence hit harder than he expected. "What do you mean?" Trump asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Jacob hesitated, as if weighing whether he should speak such uncomfortable truth to a man who held so much power. But after everything he had said so far, he chose honesty over comfort. "People out here, they love you. Many voted for you. Many still support you. But support doesn't mean they agree with everything. Sometimes support means they hope you'll listen." Trump leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked, eyes narrowing with focus. Jacob continued, Things have been happening that hurt us. Policies, market changes, regulations. Not because anyone wants to hurt us, but because the reality we live in never reaches your desk the way it should. He spoke slowly, carefully, as though he was dismantling a wall brick by brick. Sir, by the time information gets to you, it's polished, sanitized, filtered through people who think they know what you want to hear. Trump didn't interrupt. He knew exactly what Jacob meant. Washington had a way of softening blows, hiding problems, reshaping facts. He had seen it many times before. But hearing it from a farmer felt different, more personal. "Let me tell you something," Jacob said, his voice taking on a more determined tone. "When a regulation changes, people in offices see paperwork, but we see another hour added to our day. We see another cost stacked on our back. We see another fence that gets harder to climb." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And when markets shift or tariffs hit or supply chains break, experts call it economic adjustment. We call it survival." Trump felt his jaw tighten, not out of anger at Jacob, but at the system that had allowed this disconnect to grow. Jacob continued, "There are decisions you've made, decisions meant to strengthen the country, that ended up hurting us. Not because they were wrong, but because no one told you what the damage looked like from the ground." Then came a sentence that carried the weight of thousands of voices. "Sir, people out here think you forgot them, but truth is, I think no one ever told you what was really happening." Trump exhaled slowly. He wasn't used to hearing things like this directly. Most people sugar-coated their words around him. Most people softened the truth. But Jacob was giving him something rare. Unfiltered honesty. Jacob spoke again, quieter this time. "I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming the distance between our world and yours. Somewhere in that distance, our struggles got lost." He talked about proposals that sounded great in speeches but collapsed under real-world conditions. He talked about officials who claimed to speak for farmers but hadn't touched soil in decades. He talked about experts who calculated crop risks without ever standing in a field and feeling the wind shift, knowing that one bad season could destroy a family. "Mr. Trump," Jacob said, "people think you don't understand us. But the truth is, no one has given you a chance to." That sentence changed everything. It wasn't criticism. It was an invitation. An invitation to bridge a gap that had silently widened over the years. An invitation to see the world not from a podium, but from the ground. An invitation to hear the truth that had been buried beneath reports, meetings, and political noise. For the first time since the call began, Trump spoke with more emotion than formality. "Jacob, tell me everything. Don't hold back." And in that moment, the misunderstanding became clear. Not between Jacob and Trump, but between Trump and the world that fed the nation. A world he thought he understood, but was only now beginning to truly see. For a long moment, neither Jacob nor Trump spoke. It was a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full of truths that were finally being said, full of weight that had sat on one man's shoulders for far too long, full of realization settling on the other side of the phone. Trump finally leaned forward, hands folded, eyes sharp with focus. The tone of the call had changed. This wasn't a formal conversation anymore. This wasn't a politician speaking to a citizen. This was one human being listening to another. "Jacob," Trump said quietly, "tell me exactly what's happening out there." And Jacob did, not with speeches, not with rehearsed lines, but with real, unpolished truth. "Sir," Jacob began, "every single day we're fighting a battle most people don't even know exists. Farmers don't complain because our fathers taught us to be strong. But that strength, it's turning into silence. And that silence is killing us." Trump listened without blinking. Jacob continued, "Let me explain what the world looks like from this side of the soil." He described the rising cost of everything. The fertilizer that used cost $20 now costing $50. The equipment that once needed simple repairs now demanding thousands of dollars. The fuel prices that swallowed chunks of their earnings before they even made a profit. "Sir, farming costs more every year," Jacob said, "but our income doesn't. We're running faster and faster just to stay in the same place." He explained how unpredictable the market had become. One season, corn prices rose. The next season, They crashed without warning. One year soybeans brought hope. The next year they brought loss. It feels like gambling with your life savings, Jacob said. Except we don't get to walk away. Trump felt his chest tighten. Reports never framed it like this. Reports showed charts, numbers, percentages. But Jacob was showing him people, real people, drowning under numbers that economists called fluctuations. Jacob continued with the issue of regulations. What sounded simple in Washington was a burden on farmers. You see a paragraph on paper, Jacob said, but to us, that paragraph means hours of compliance, more paperwork, more money, more pressure. He explained how something as simple as a new environmental rule could cost thousands in changes, how a minor shift in trade policies could leave crops rotting because markets suddenly froze. Jacob didn't hold back. Sir, when the government makes a mistake, farmers pay for it. When markets collapse, farmers pay for it. When policy shifts, farmers pay for it. And when we can't pay anymore, we lose everything. There was no anger in his voice, just truth. Then came the part that shook Trump more deeply than he expected. Mr. Trump, we're not asking for pity. We're not asking for freebies. We don't want handouts. We want fairness. We want to survive doing the job nobody else wants to do. Jacob described the mental toll, the stress that woke farmers up at night, the fear of losing a legacy, the pressure of working harder each year only to watch the bank account shrink. He spoke of a neighbor, a man in his 60s, who had farmed his whole life. The man went out to his barn one morning, stared at a stack of overdue bills, and broke down crying, not because he was weak, but because he no longer knew how to save his farm. Trump felt those words hit deeper than any politician's speech ever had, because this wasn't a complaint. This was a confession of a lifetime of suppressed pain. Jacob then said something that changed the entire tone of the call. Sir, we're carrying the country on our backs, but no one sees the weight, and we're starting to break. Trump didn't speak at first. He took a deep breath, letting the words settle in his mind. This wasn't a political issue. It was a human issue, a survival issue. Jacob, Trump finally said, voice lower, more personal than before, I didn't know it was this bad. I really didn't. I know you didn't, Jacob replied. That's why I called. Because someone had to tell you, not the cleaned-up version, not the political version, the truth. And suddenly, something inside Trump shifted. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shock. It was responsibility, clear, heavy, and undeniable. In that moment, Trump made a private decision, a decision that he didn't say out loud yet, but one he felt in his gut. He wasn't going to let Jacob's truth go unheard. After the call ended, Trump didn't move. He just sat there, elbows on the desk, staring at nothing as Jacob's words replayed over and over in his mind. There were calls he forgot within minutes. There were meetings that blurred together. But this was different. This felt like a responsibility he hadn't realized he had been ignoring. He finally stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city. The buildings, the traffic, the noise, it all felt so far from the quiet world Jacob described. And yet, those quiet fields were the reason millions of people in those buildings had food on their plates. How many Jacobs are out there? He murmured to himself. The answer, he knew, was thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The next morning, Trump gathered his team, advisors, economic experts, agricultural specialists, everyone he thought needed to hear Jacob's truth. They arrived expecting a standard briefing, but Trump didn't give them one. Instead, he replayed parts of the call he had recorded with Jacob's permission. The room went silent. No one had ever heard a farmer speak this directly, this honestly, without filters, without political calculation. Jacob's voice carried a weight that no spreadsheet or report could ever deliver. Trump turned to his team. This, he said firmly, is what's happening, and we're fixing it. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Over the next few days, Trump pushed his team harder than he had in months, not to create speeches or publicity, but to find real solutions, solutions that would actually reach the farmers living through the reality Jacob described. He told them, no lobbyists, no middlemen. I want to hear from real farmers. And so a plan was set. Within 2 weeks, Trump arranged a series of direct listening sessions, real, face-to-face conversations with farmers from across the country. Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Texas, Georgia. He wanted voices from everywhere. He wanted stories, struggles, and ideas straight from the people who lived them. But he didn't stop there. He decided he would go see the fields himself. When the news broke that Trump wanted to visit rural farming communities, not for a rally, not for a political show, but simply to listen, many were shocked. Some doubted it. Others thought it was symbolic. But for Jacob, it meant everything. 2 weeks after their call, Jacob received another phone call. Not from an assistant, not from a secretary, from Trump himself. "Jacob," Trump said warmly, "I wanted you to hear this from me. Your call didn't just change my mind, it changed our direction. I'm coming to Iowa, and I want to meet you." Jacob froze, gripping the phone with both hands. He wasn't a man who got emotional easily, but in that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not blind hope, not political hope, but real, grounded hope born from truth being heard. "Sir," Jacob said softly, "thank you, not for coming, but for listening." Trump smiled on the other side of the line. "Listening," he replied, "was the easy part. Now we fix it." And that was the beginning of something new. A new understanding, a new partnership between leadership and the land, a new path where the voices buried in the fields were finally being carried to the highest office. All because one farmer picked up a phone and one leader was willing to listen.